Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to present via recorded video to this conference. I'm sorry that I'm not with you in person. I want to thank our host, the Association of Valencian Archivists, and also congratulate them on 25 years of successful archival management. My name is Corinne Rogers, and I'm the project coordinator for InterPARES Trust AI, which is in its final year of research right now. And previously, I was project coordinator for InterPARES Trust from 2012 to 2018. And I've been associated with the InterPARES phases since the end of InterPARES 2, when I joined as a graduate research assistant in 2005, and then continued as a graduate research assistant in InterPARES 3. So today I'm going to be introducing InterPARES 3 to you. I'll talk at a high level briefly about the purpose and goals, the partners and its organization, the connection to IP1, IP2, iTrust, and iTrust AI, and I'll identify some of the key case studies and products that came out of InterPARES 3. So first and foremost, InterPARES broadly is an international network of students, researchers, academics, colleagues, and friends that began in 1998 and is still going strong today. We have partners around the world, and many of the students who started with the project back in 1998 and in the early 2000s are now in key archival positions and management positions in organizations around the world. So just a very quick recap, because I know that Luciana has introduced InterPARES 1 and 2. Quick recap that InterPARES 1 researched issues pertaining to digital records that were being created and saved in databases and office management systems in the course of administrative activity. And the focus of InterPARES 1 was to test archival theory and further develop theory and methods to ensure the preservation of authentic records using archival diplomatics, primarily from the archival side of things. And they studied records from the perspective of the records preserver. How could people preserve these records? InterPARES 2 broadened the investigation to digital records that were increasingly being developed in new systems, dynamic and interactive systems, not just in the course of administrations, but also in the pursuit of artistic, scientific, and as well as government activity. And they looked at issues of authenticity, reliability, and accuracy over the life cycle of these records, and identified what records actually were in these systems. And they looked at records from the perspective of the record's creator. So at the end of InterPARES 2, there were two very comprehensive but dense books of theory and findings from InterPARES 1 and InterPARES 2. And some people claimed that these findings were too detailed and too costly to put into practice in all but perhaps the biggest and best funded of organizations and institutions. Challenge accepted. So InterPARES 3 was proposed to put theory into practice in archives and in records units in organizations that maybe had limited financial or limited human resources or both. A single archivist fighting for funding. How could they put these ideas and theories into practice to develop programs, archival programs, records management programs that would protect the authenticity of records in their care and be demonstrably, do it in a demonstrable way. So the purpose was to apply and test the findings and products of InterPARES 1 and 2 to implement these sound programs supporting creation and preservation of digital records that could be shown to be authentic, reliable, and accurate. Researchers in InterPARES 3 were organized into 12 national and international teams, team being an acronym for theoretical elaborations into archival management, and 13 research questions were posed that covered broad areas of inquiry. Implementation of theory and methods, these were undertaken in general studies that crossed regions, and organizations. And this included a development of common terminology that all archivists could rely on. Contextual appropriate adaptations of the findings were tested in a variety of case studies in individual organizations. And then continuing education was discussed and developed with guidelines for professionals. And the case studies provided a really unique and important opportunity for student researchers, the GRAs, to conduct research directly under the direction of professionals in the field. And I think this is where many of the job opportunities came about. Graduate research assistants worked with people in organizations in many different countries, and then continued when they graduated to work in those organizations or similar organizations. So the general studies were investigations that were carried out by different teams to address a broad topic. So this might be contextual to that team, that regional or national or international team, or relevant across teams, but not related to a specific case or a specific testbed partner. And the general studies were conducted by Team Canada, Catalonia, Italy, Mexico, Brazil, Singapore, and Korea. And the topics included terminology, of course, education modules, investigation and development of standards, policy and procedures, both the development and implementation, cost-benefit models, metadata, community archives, social media, email, websites, photographic and audiovisual heritage, and other questions. And this is a list of all of the general studies. So you can see the broad range of ideas that were discussed and investigated. And I've got stars next to 3 of these. We're going to talk very briefly about the International Terminology Database, about the Digital Records Management and Preservation Education modules. And I've starred the metadata application profiles because when the publication comes out from this conference, the chapter for InterPARES 3 that is written by Dr. Joe Tennis from the University of Washington is going to focus on the metadata application profiles. So the Multilingual Archival Terminology Database, or MAT, was a joint endeavor between the International Council on Archives, the section for archival education and training, and subsequent support from the United Arab Emirates. And the work was conducted by InterPARES. So it identified core archival concepts and terms, made them available in 25 languages, and then relied on professionals in the field in those languages and in those cultural contexts to interpret and translate those core concepts and terms. So the MAT serves as an international source for terminology and definitions that's used by many traditions and express shared archival concepts. And the translation is not intended to be word for word translation from one language to another. So often we see English predominating, and we wanted to reflect the usage in that language rather than just a translation from English. It's a dynamic instrument that reflects international archival practice and terminology usage, and also its evolution over time. It was created and is created by archival professionals from around the world who rely on authoritative sources and common practice. And it's a tool that is maintained still by its users, by professionals, academics, researchers, and archival students, constantly up-to-date reference. And it is the terminology reference for the ICA education modules and for the InterPARES education modules, digital records pathways, topics in digital preservation, and an opportunity for its users to inform the archival world about the development of new concepts identified by specific terms and definitions. And this is just an image of the homepage of the Multilingual Archival Terminology Database, and you can access it from this link, ciscra.org/mat. And you can see the wide range of languages that are available. And New languages can be added at any time. Just needs to make a request and we can do that. So for continuing education, we developed a set of 8 education modules, and this was intended to provide high-level guidance for records preservers, for professional associations and university programs, as well as being written in a manner that was accessible for non-archivists, such as IT professionals, vendors, service providers, professionals in a variety of communities of practice who are concerned about records preservation. And we had a strategy for delivery as well. So there's a 15-minute introductory video for the modules that just outlines the purpose and the content at a high level. And then the modules themselves are free to download. The first module is an introduction and a framework for digital preservation. Module 2 talks about developing policy and procedures for digital preservation. Module 3 addresses the issues of organizational culture and its effects on records management. Module 4, an overview of metadata. Module 5, which perhaps is in some ways dated now. I'm not sure how many organizations are still dealing with network drives in their organizations. However, this is looking at appraisal strategies for gaining control of records that are in network drives. Email management and preservation was Module 6. Management and preservation of records in web environments, Module 7. And then Module 8, a primer for cloud computing, which gives a nice explanation of what cloud computing is. So all of these are at a theoretical enough and high enough level to still be relevant for use and in communities of practice today. The case studies were carried out in partner organizations who came to us with a particular issue or problem that they wanted to explore by implementing the findings of InterPARES 1 and 2. And they spanned all levels of activity. So government, national banks, universities, local, regional, and national archives, businesses, arts organizations, law enforcement, the courts. They were all represented in these testbed partners. And they were the subject, the locus, the participants, and the stakeholders in this process of inquiry and research, and the primary and immediate beneficiaries of the research. The methodology that we used for the case study was basically an ethnographic inquiry and one of prototype development. In each case, the testbed partner would identify an issue to be investigated. For example, developing a preservation plan to be developed for a body of digital records, or a policy need, or a system they needed designed and implemented to manage their records. Then there would be a process of data collection using templates that we developed in InterPARES 3 for a contextual analysis of the organization itself and the record keeping and record creating environment, a diplomatic analysis of the records themselves, interviews, modeling, whatever was appropriate based on the particular case study, about the specific body of material, its documentary forms, the technological constraints, functional or cultural meanings, etc. Then that would be iterated through developing and proposing solutions and testing those solutions in place with the case study partner, and then iterative refinements of that and a final report, a final product, a set of policy recommendations, for example, or a schematic for a digital records preservation system. So the contextual and diplomatic analyses, these templates were very comprehensive and used in all of the case studies. So the contextual analysis was a systematic presentation of information about the testbed partner that facilitated understanding of the context of record creation, management, and preservation. And it was based on the contexts identified in archival diplomatics. So the juridical administrative context, the laws and regulations and norms that governed the organization, the provenantial context, the governance of the organization, its mandate and philosophy, the documentary context, the records management program, the procedural context, the policies and procedures in place or not in place, as the case may be, and the technological context in which records were created, managed, and preserved. Then the diplomatic analysis looked in a systematic way at the digital entities that were under consideration in the case study. And this was intended to allow researchers to determine what actually was and was not a record in that system, and then look at how that needed to be either enhanced with metadata or how it could be preserved. So again, based on archival diplomatics, the diplomatic analysis looked at digital entities in terms of, did they have fixed form and stable content within the concept of bounded variability? Did they participate in an action? Was there an archival bond? So was each digital entity bound in some identifiable way to the other digital entities that preceded and followed it in carrying out that activity? Could the involvement of at least 3 persons be identified? The author of the digital entity, the writer, and the addressee. And also for these digital entities, we were looking for the creator and the originator of the entity. And then identifying the contexts in which the action generated the record. So these 2 analyses form the foundation of inquiry research and the proposed solutions or recommendations for each case study. So, for example, Team Canada had 15 case studies across sectors. So Team Canada had the most case studies. Team Brazil had the next with 10, I believe. And it crossed these cross sectors. So there were universities, people, organizations from the GLAM sector, galleries, libraries, archives, museums, the Canadian Tourism Commission, the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, the Vancouver Police Department, Vancouver School of Theology, and municipal government, represented by the Legislative Services Department of the City of Surrey, which is the 2nd largest city in British Columbia. Developing all of these aspects of records management and archival programs, we looked at policy and procedures in many of the cases. Email management was also critically important to many of the testbed partners. Requirements analysis for digital preservation, how to configure an EDRMS to ensure that records were managed and preserved, and preservation and access systems for digital video. And in conclusion, the findings of InterPARES 1 and 2 were adaptable to a broad range of institutions and needs, allowing for development of theory-based programs for records management and digital preservation. And I've put a link here to all of the case studies in InterPARES 3 for people who want to pursue this. Now, Team Catalonia was another team that had 3 case studies, and I've got links to these 3 case studies. I'm not going to discuss them here, but I think there are people present at the conference who could probably discuss them and give you information about them. So the success of InterPARES has always depended on several things. First and foremost, I would say that the success depends on Luciana Durante's vision and energy and her uncompromising commitment to theoretical archival principles over the entire course of all phases of InterPARES. It also depends on all of the students and researchers and colleagues who agreed with that perspective and contributed to developing the theory and implementing the principles, giving their time to do research, bringing their organizations along on side, applying the findings in their organizations. And finally, we have to thank the technology itself, because the technology has been changing so rapidly that each phase of InterPARES has looked at a new iteration of technology. And yet there's always been this continuity of the challenges and problems of assessing and protecting the authenticity of digital entities and digital records that are being created in these technological systems. So the unifying goal has been researching the means of creating and preserving over the long term authentic records that satisfy the requirements of their stakeholders and society's need for an adequate record of the past. And each phase of the project has tackled emerging technological environments that challenge the records concepts, from InterPARES 1 with databases and office systems, right up to InterPARES Trust AI, which is looking at records and objects, digital entities that are coming out of machine learning and generative AI. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. And I hope that if you have questions, I know that I have colleagues who are present either online or in person who I'm sure can answer your questions. Thank you very much.